All right, we are live. So, hello everybody, and welcome to the Pixar Post Book Club discussion for the Pixar Touch, the fantastic book by Mr. David A. Price. I actually have a couple versions of it here. I happen to have actually the audiobook version. I have the paperback version, which I'll discuss in a minute, and then also the hardback, which is the original one that I got, and I love this one. Because as I've talked about in our post, I love when the edges, it's not probably going to fully get there, when the edges of pages have that deckled edge, as it's called, where the pages ruffle in and out. I'm also being joined by Jeff Kays, who is somebody that we've had on our podcast before, on episode 15, where we got into the deep analysis of Monsters Incorporated. And he also runs the great site thisdayinpixar.com. So if you haven't checked that out, please do that. But Jeff, go ahead and say hello.
Yeah, hey, how's it going?
Excellent. And so obviously, I mentioned which versions of the book that I have here, but what version do you have?
I have the hard copy.
Oh, you've got the... I'm sorry, you were saying the other one? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also have it on my iPod. I have the iBook version.
Yes. Yeah, let me see. I think I should have it. I was trying to catch up on some of the areas. So yeah, you can see the Pixar Touch. There we go.
Yeah.
Try to cover all the bases. So anybody that's listening as well, if you happen to have any questions, there is a comment section that should be available where you can ask questions in a Q&A. I'm going to actually open that up on my screen here. We are on a little bit of a delay, about a 7 to 10 second delay from what Jeff and I are saying to what's actually broadcast out there. So we might be a little bit behind in the questions. And then alternatively, you can, and I point over here because my screen is over here, but if you have any questions and you can ask them on Twitter as well with the hashtag PixarPostBC for Book Club. And I am going to do one more thing here real quick. Not cameraman, I'm going to this one. And I am going to Book Club. There we go. So the hashtag is now on the screen. Anybody can remember that at any time, that Pixar Post BC is where you want to send any questions if you're on Twitter. Again, you can ask those questions right here in the chat window if you happen to be watching on Google Hangout as well. So the discussion, one of the things that I was looking to actually and really hoping to have work out was I was actually inviting the author itself, David Price, to join us in this discussion. Unfortunately, it didn't work out with his schedule, but because we even had the discussions and went back and forth a couple times on trying to figure out a time and all that, the reason why I happen to have the paperback, it's actually very extremely kind, is that he said, I really wish I could have been there. So he actually sent over, and we just received it today, says to TJ and Julie with appreciation, David. So how cool is that?
That's sweet. That was really nice.
Yeah, and he actually threw in one extra little thing, which I thought was pretty darn cool as well, because obviously, he's a book guy himself. And so we're not reading this book next time, even though maybe we should change it up and do that now. But he also sent over an extra copy of The Art of Ratatouille that he had, and we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing this as a giveaway on our site when we actually start reading this book. So that way somebody will have it if they don't already, and be able to join in and do that as well. So certainly, first off, just want to say thank you to David Price, not only for the excellent work in the Pixar Touch, but also for sending over that great autograph copy and The Art of Ratatouille that we're going to give away to one of our future book club readers.
Yep.
So pretty cool. So since this is the first time you've been on the Hangout and people may not fully know Jeff, give a quick second and give an overview of, just introduce yourself and then also what your site typically covers.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff, and I'm running thisdayinpixar.com. I try to cover a lot of historical things with Pixar, and, that's most of it, I guess, just more historical events that have occurred. So I've done a lot with their financials, their IPO, and a lot of the early history that's in this book, for instance, this was a source I used a lot for some of my posts because it's just so full of great information. So I go back to the early years when they were at Lucasfilm, and throughout, all their years. So covering the merger with Disney and things like that.
Yeah, and frankly, I've gone to your site many times as well, and I've used it as reference for things. But you're absolutely right. The book is a great reference, and it's definitely the one that I've referenced the most, because from a Pixar history standpoint, it's the most kind of all-inclusive, if you will.
Right. Yeah, it's just, I don't know if we want to jump in right away, but I like that it goes back before Pixar, before even Lucasfilm, back to Ed Catmull in college, and just so much great detail of those early years. And it's hard to find that kind of information.
It absolutely is, and that's one of the things that, if David were here, I would love to chat with him about too, because I have no clue how somebody digs up this much comprehensive information from the past all the way through, what movie does it go through here? Is it Cars?
Ratatouille even, it talks a little
That's right,
about.
Ratatouille. That's right, Ratatouille. And in fact, I think the updated paperback version actually covers a little bit further as well, if I remember, because there was a little bit of an update. Yeah, it even goes through December 2008. So that's a pretty cool thing that he added that little addendum on there as well. But either way, so that, and I can hear you now, Jeff, but I can't see you. Are you?
No, I'm here. Don't worry. I had a little technical difficulty, so I am here.
That's okay. I just can't see your face. Can you see yourself?
Yes, I can. So.
Oh, well, good. So that's all that matters.
I know what's wrong. So there's a little. I'm having a little activity in the background here that I didn't want to be up on the screen. So you just have to give me about 30 seconds, I hope.
Oh, yeah, you're fine. You're perfectly fine. In the meantime, we get to see that awesome picture of you at Pixar.
At the studios, yeah.
Right, and those aliens, the aliens, was that when they were still in the now Steve Jobs building? Or was that when they got, because they're over in Brooklyn now, that secondary building?
Yeah, so that was over at the Steve Jobs building.
Okay.
Just when you walk in the main doors over to the right. So.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Cool. And I think is that where the Luigi and Guido are now, or was it somewhere else? I don't remember where.
It was further over. It was behind the awards display case and further over. Sure.
Yeah. So as we were kind of talking, as far as all the different research and all those kind of things, I still can't get past as far as. I mean, this even gets into, and we'll start, getting into more specifics as we talk. But not only did you talk about, Catmull in college and those types of things, we have the history and the background of Steve Jobs. I mean, it talks about Steve Jobs, grew up in, all. It goes into that and how he got his whole motivation to starting Apple and Wozniak. There's so many layers in this book. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. All those main players, Lasseter and, like you said, Jobs, all of them are covered in such great detail from when they were kids, and so it's just so much fun to read information like that.
Yeah, so absolutely. In case anybody is listening to this and they haven't necessarily read it, but they're just listening along now to get a little bit of an overview of the book, can't recommend it enough. It is by far one of the best. One of the best books out there on the topic. We have had a couple questions come in. I don't think that some of these aren't going to be covered in the book, but we'll go ahead and talk about them too. Somebody asked, since I brought up the Brooklyn building, what is its purpose? So the purpose of the Brooklyn building, and Jeff, if you happen to know anything extra in here, or if you have any extra tidbits, feel free to let me know. But the Steve Jobs building is where some of the main elements. Where the animators are and all those kind of things. The Brooklyn building is the newer building that was built, and that's where a lot of the directors and the story development takes place. Is that pretty much what you had known as well, Jeff?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I've understood it, right.
Right.
The Brooklyn building is gorgeous. Oh, man. It is just a beautiful building, has some wonderful artwork. I saw it once. They had artwork from Brave, but they also have a rooftop patio, and so it was really nice to be up there, and beautiful view of the campus there, and very nice.
See, now the sad thing is that although I've been to the studio, I've never been to the Brooklyn building.
Yeah, it's a cool building. Julie was there though, wasn't she?
She did get to see the Brooklyn building, but she basically saw the atrium area and a little bit in there as far as where the other theater is and all that. But she didn't get a huge tour of that. But yeah, she was lucky enough to get a little bit more detailed than I was there.
You would like it. Up on the third or fourth floor, whatever the top floor is, in the conference room is a huge table, and the tabletop is made of all the different die-cast cars. And then there's a layer of glass or something over it.
I've seen a photo of that, and yes, I would absolutely love that, as you can tell, as evident. You already know, of course, but yes, for the people that haven't known, yes, I have a little bit of a die-cast cars obsession.
Yeah.
Okay, so we also had just another one. We'll just do this one off the cuff here. If we're talking about The Good Dinosaur, there was some news on that. We'll throw this little bit of news in at the beginning. Who do you think is going to direct it? Did it fall to Pete Sohn, or is someone else jumping in? Since we've heard this good news that John Lithgow said that he's going in to re-record lines, they've completely reimagined the script. Who do you think is going to direct it? Let's get your opinion.
Yeah, I think Pete will be the main director. I think it'll be some kind of co-director type setup, but he will be the first listed. So.
I think so as well. Okay, so that's a fun little fact that we did there. One other little off-the-wall one that we had is Jace mentioned, I saw on Wikipedia that Pixar was going to produce a live-action film with Brad Bird. Is this true, or is Wikipedia just a source of bad info? I'm going to say that one is not true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel the same way?
Totally, right.
Okay.
There's a little confusion there. I'm sure, obviously, he is directing live-action films, just not associated with Pixar.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's jump into the book a little bit here. I'm actually going to remove my dust jacket, just so that way I don't make too much extra noise with that as I'm riffling through it. And then I have my officially typed notes here. You see how official this is?
Oh, man.
Yeah, well...
Okay.
It starts out official, but then you get further. So I'll be looking down a little bit as we go through, but just to give an idea as far as how the book kind of progresses, it starts out with the first chapter is called Anaheim, and it essentially opens up with a great overview. And this is why one of the reasons I really love this book too is it really paints the picture of the coolness, the history, and the uniqueness of Pixar kind of all caught up in that first chapter because it's a great summary, a great way to pull you right in. And it starts with Lasseter at a shareholder meeting at the acquisition of Pixar by Disney when it's being purchased for $7.3 billion. And I love how it starts out with as John Lasseter's talking, how John Lasseter's wife Nancy makes the funny comment that she told him, "You better dress up," because obviously he's known for all of his Hawaiian shirts and sport coats and all those kind of things. She said, "You better dress up." So he makes the joke and he says, "I wore my black shoes today."
Yeah.
So just first off, I mean that's a great way. I mean, you just get the endearingness and the heart right off the bat with the book through that opening. I just thought it was such a great opening.
Yeah, I loved it too. I really enjoyed that even though it's this historical look at things, they didn't go all the way back right away, giving that view and the excitement of the merger and everything. I mean, I remember when the merger went through and everything, how cool and exciting it was, and just the excitement, you could feel it, from everyone in the crowd at the shareholder meeting, and yeah, I thought it was a great start to the book.
All right, so again, I'm going to deviate a little here. I actually was not listening to that. Were you listening to that live, that meeting?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, that would have been That would have been pretty cool, but yeah, I didn't listen to that one myself, but I've obviously since listened to many, and then, um, but yeah, I would have loved to have been there to feel that energy coming off the audience. I mean, there definitely was that sense of just such a, I mean, like they talked about before too, that all the Disney shareholder meetings were held in, cold places, and they were held in, winter months and all these other things. And this was the time that they were like, we don't need to do this. We're going to do it at summer in a warm place. It's a big celebration, and it was definitely a nice change of pace. And so I think everybody was just feeling the excitement and energy coming off of that.
Totally. They held it in Minneapolis sometime. I don't know. It was about 2004, and I actually went to that one.
Oh, cool.
And yeah. So that was really fun to see. Eisner, and I think Roy Disney was there, and just people like that, and tons of characters, Mickey Mouse and Minnie and Goofy are, walking through the audience, and so that was a great time.
Wow.
But
yeah,
if you look at when the merger went through, and just go back even a year before that, when Eisner was still the CEO, and he had that shareholder vote where 43% of the people, of the shareholders, voted not to have him reelected to the board. And things weren't looking very good for Disney. And now you just jump ahead a year later, and all the excitement and everything surrounding the merger. It's, what a turnaround.
yeah, and it's crazy because they said that Disney distributing Pixar films made up 45% of Disney's operating income of their Disney Film Operations division. That's just absolutely astronomical that a distribution deal could be that much of their profits.
Right, yeah. And you're talking about Pixar putting out less than a film a year.
Right.
And how many films was Disney putting out a year? Live action and animated. I think that included both.
I think it did as well. Yeah, that's absolutely astounding to think of that. Yeah. And then obviously there was that other fact that they pointed out, that market research said that young kids trust the Pixar name more than the Disney name.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking. And I think that would definitely wake up the board of directors and a CEO to hear that.
Oh, God. I can't even fathom a world where kids wouldn't trust the Disney name as well as the Pixar name, but certainly not trusting. I mean, I guess they didn't say they didn't trust it; they just trusted Pixar more. But still, that's earth-shattering. That's earth-shattering, though.
Yeah. Yep.
So the other thing that was great about the chapter too is, it kind of gives the introduction to Ed Catmull and talks about how he stumbled into being a leader and some of his background that he gained at NYT and Lucasfilms. And what I thought was really interesting with that is you certainly know that David Price got the background right, because that is exactly what Ed Catmull mirrors in his own book.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was really kind of cool that they talked about how he stumbled into being a leader, and almost the same exact verbiage came through when you're talking and reading through Ed Catmull's book. Just great stuff to see the continuity there. It really adds to the level of trust and detail that went into the book.
Yeah, you just can really trust the amount of research and the research that he did. And along those same lines, I think he talks about how kind of the founders of the company, Lasseter and Jobs and Catmull, all kind of went through these really tough periods at the beginning of their careers. I mean, John Lasseter was fired from Disney. Right. And talking about Jobs, how he was booted out of Apple, the company he founded, before they all kind of came together and formed this company. And then comparing that to the struggles that Pixar had originally as a hardware company, and how that really was not successful, and they had to spin that out and go into the animation. That's when they became successful. So I really like that comparison between the leaders of the company and the company itself.
Yeah, that is true. And in fact, I thought about that while reading the whole book, as far as talking about, as they dug into Catmull's background and Lasseter's and Steve Jobs. And yeah, the same thing I was thinking the whole time. In fact, I was writing notes about that, saying, I can't believe that essentially they all were if you look back at it now, what they were doing wasn't a failure, but they were all viewed as a failure in some element at time. But then, yeah, this fusion and this constant will to just keep pushing forward and trying, even when, in the face of everything, in fact, I got to remember which chapter it was. They talked about how, essentially Pixar wasn't even paying their employees all that well at the beginning because they're a startup and they don't have all this funding. But the idea is that they just still had this strong belief that they were making something cool, while at the same time, Disney was essentially taking such a huge chunk of their profits, and they said, well, you know what, we're still just going to keep driving forward with this vision in the hopes that we're making the best product and that it's going to get us where we need to go. And that is just, I can't imagine the heart and the drive that has to be there in order for that level of energy and drive to continue you forward without it buckling you at some point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How I think that was during the making of Toy Story, right?
Exactly.
So,
yeah, that's what it was.
Yep. And just the sheer excitement of doing something so revolutionary. Yeah, what a situation, to have been in.
Yeah, I'm looking around for all my notes, and in fact, it says it right here. I thought it was great. I thought it was great when the book discusses that each of its Pixar leaders have experienced failure of varying degrees and how people that follow uncharted paths do so for economic as well as non-economic reasons. They just want to create. And I thought that was really cool, that it doesn't matter necessarily if you want to make money on something. The thing that I really took away from that is if you're really, really looking to chart a course of something, at some level you're going to have to go through probably not making the kind of money that you want to make.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you really have to have that passion in the heart. And how many times have we heard Pixar people say that, they're not making these films solely for the money, right? There's so much more to it. And I just think that really comes out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that you and I talked about before the broadcast started, but I wanted to bring it up one more time, was at the very beginning we talked about how cool Lasseter was with all of his Hawaiian shirts and such. But go ahead and show your shirt there, and tell everybody where is that one from again here.
So this is a crew, I think it's an official crew Toy Story 2 shirt, and I believe I won it on through an auction, through one of the eBay auctions, maybe. Lee Unkrich, he was doing some for Haiti a number of years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I got it from. Yeah, I've only worn it, I think I've only worn it 3 times. So
is that just to keep it nice and safe?
Exactly, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Yeah, there's been a couple of our review videos where I have the Toy Story 1. I have a Toy Story 3, Monsters University, and Cars 2. That's the only ones that I have. But it's been one of those ones that it's like you go to the studio, you see them there. It's like you just want to live a little bit of that Lasseter excitement, and you're like, I'll channel him through the shirt.
No doubt. Yep.
So anyways, that's kind of where the first chapter lies. The second chapter, titled "In the Garage," it gives this great introduction as far as slices in time, how sometimes there are these moments in eras where greatness happens. They talk about the Renaissance period of painting, but they reference specifically that Utah's computer graphics scene in the 60s into the 70s. And it goes through all of those different people that somehow or another found their way there. And if you think about all of the developments, advances, and I guess just ways that computer graphics got pushed forward, it's absolutely astounding to think, how did that all happen, and why was Utah, of all places, the place?
Yeah, I don't know if I guess it was just, Evans and Sutherland, the professors there.
Right.
And, but yeah, how they were able to bring together these people, because it is pretty amazing, the group of folks that they had brought together and what they went off and created. I mean, the founder of Netscape, Jim Clark,
Right.
founder of Netscape, the founder of Silicon Graphics, and Alan Kay and John Warnock. Just, these became the leaders of the computer graphics industry. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's astounding how many people were there, like we were just talking about. But one of the things I thought was interesting was because of the whole Sputnik trend that was going on, the ARPA, as they called it, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, was a government program that was put in place to help fund the future of technology-based products. And so I was thinking about this. Do we have, in some small way, do we owe the government a thank you for funding and potentially starting Pixar?
Yeah, I mean, government has funded a lot of things that, I mean, the internet came out of DARPA, and
Sure. Yep.
So yeah, maybe in some roundabout way we can.
I'll take it as like a fifth extension, like it's like a fifth cousin or something like that.
Sure.
But I thought it was. I was just like, wow. All of these things. Ed Catmull being born when he was, being in Utah already. He didn't even have to move there. And then you've got this ARPA program that's starting up where they're funding this whole thing and trying to push this forward. And just all the different things that they talk about with all this, with all the money that they were just throwing at technology and development to get these minds to grow and giving them all this space to do what they needed to do. And that's like, what Ed talks about in his book, again, it's talked about in here, that space is what allowed them to have the freedom to make and do all these things, which is how he then carried that management principle in a way over to Pixar when he was starting and developing that, and NYT and all those other.
Right, yeah, that environment, that educational environment, the collaborativeness of it, and the sharing of information, you can really see how going from the Utah and having that kind of environment really permeated the at NYIT and Lucasfilm, and into Pixar too. So just the sharing, they were willing to go to SIGGRAPH and all these talks and share everything that they were learning, and so much of that got its beginning at Utah.
Yeah, and in fact, talking about SIGGRAPH, it's really interesting to think about how so many elements that if SIGGRAPH didn't even exist, there's so many different times that John Lasseter would have been able to show what he was working on. Catmull wouldn't have been able to show what he was working on. You wouldn't have had that introduction of because who was it? Was it Lasseter and Catmull that eventually collided and introduced each other or got at SIGGRAPH?
No, that wasn't at SIGGRAPH. That was some other conference.
Okay.
But Lauren Carpenter came through SIGGRAPH. He did his animation, and L.B. Ray Smith and Catmull hired him right then. They saw that animation he did, and they hired him on the spot. So
yeah, it's crazy, just absolutely crazy, and it makes you think of how storied that history of SIGGRAPH is, and frankly, it just makes me want to go even more in the future. I know most of it, as not a technical person, would be whoo, and we talked about that before, that it would be just so over your head, but just to be there and be part of that would be a very grand thing, if you will.
Well, definitely, because you wonder what inventions and findings that are happening now will make its way into filmmaking in the next, however many years. So there's new things going on all the time, and it would just be, like you said, so cool to be a part of that and be a part of that environment a little bit.
Yeah. Now, as far as them talking about this time period where everything kind of came together for computer graphics, and this is totally off topic, but I was starting to think about, is there any other thing, and I might just not be thinking about it, and you may not have this answer either, but I just thought it was interesting. Is there another time period post that, outside of maybe the internet, what's the next big thing after that was like, okay, we've had all these things come together and now we can deploy it? Is there another thing that's like this, of creation of art or of whatever?
Wow.
That's a deep and hard question. I was just throwing it out there because it just came across my mind.
Nothing's, coming to mind right now, so...
Yeah. That's not a problem. I was just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
So also in Catmull's book, and again, it's mirrored in this one, talks about his desire to get into animation and how he always had this underlying drive to get there no matter what was happening. And it was really fun to read the details again of those of the great correlation between when he scanned his hand in the plaster and tore it off and forgot about putting on Vaseline and tearing out the hairs, just like in his book.
Right.
But it was crazy to also see and all of the different things that Catmull was a part of, or at least instrumental in creating, with texture mapping, with the Z buffer, with this hidden layer where if you've got something in front of something else, what happens with that data behind it when it's unseen. You've got the tweening, that where you create a keyframe here and a keyframe here, and what happens to that animation in between. He wrote that program to fill that in. I mean, It's just, how do you create all of that stuff, and how does just having the knowledge of computer graphics and technology, and then putting that into the passion of animation and digitization and all those kind of things. It's just amazing that the passion was all there, and it just forwarded the way it did.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's just no doubt Ed is brilliant. So, and like you said, yeah, to be able to come up with those discoveries that are still, all those discoveries that you mentioned are still in use in the software that they're using now. So, it's stunning.
Right. Yeah. There's, in fact, any of the if you look at on Pixar's technical site, they'll reference in the back, here's what we're using, and it always says, like the Catmull-Clark layer subdivision surfaces. There's so many things where Catmull's name is attached to it. Now, again, he is clearly not the only one that was working on any of this. It was a large group, but as far as specifically from an animation point, that's where I think he's getting a lot of that credit, because he was really pushing that forward, along with the computer graphics side of things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's in the book. David Price talks about how Lucas had this group of computer graphic experts that he wasn't making always best use of. I mean, you had Lauren Carpenter and Bill Reeves and Rob Cook and just all of these brilliant minds coming up with these great tools, and so it's just kind of
yeah, and speaking of Lucas, as you're saying that, one thing came to my mind, and it was where essentially, and I'm jumping ahead a little, and then I'll go back, but where they brought on Lasseter into Lucas, and they gave him, what was his fake title that they gave him?
Interface designer, wasn't it?
Interface designer. I don't remember all this. You're not even looking at notes.
Yeah.
But yeah, interface designer. How do you have the gumption to sit there and just say, you know what, this guy is an interface designer, but in the background he's really doing something else? Could you imagine the guts that it takes to do that, knowing that essentially if it's found out, your job is on the line most likely, and you're out of there?
Right, yeah. Guts, and there again, it gets back to the passion. They were focused on doing this animation. And again, they spin off the company out of Lucasfilm. They didn't spin off an animation company. They spun out a hardware company. And, what experience did Ed and Alvy have creating hardware? And that wasn't their passion and their focus. It was doing animation. So throughout that whole, all those years, it's just a fun story.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, because, frankly, if you were part of a company that kept not only having so much change, because a lot of times, people are very resistant to change, and certainly there's a lot of people that came and went at Pixar. But if you're at a company that is going through so much change and is constantly, you're almost fighting constantly against what you really want to do there. How do you continue to hold a seat there and continue to do what you do and get paid? But I'd have to get out of there. I'd be like, this is not aligning with what I want to do. Let's find somewhere that it will.
Yeah, that might be really a struggle. But I think what kept them together again was just the core group of people that they had. You had the best people in the world all there. So if you were to go, what were you going to do? Because all the experts were there. I mean,
Right.
that's kind
Yeah.
of why they left NYIT. They knew they had to, but they had to do it in a way that they could bring everyone with them. So it took a number of months to get everyone out of NYIT and over to Lucasfilm. But yeah, where else are you going to go? I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But
I think about it like, you're gonna all of a sudden come across this other company that's doing it. But yeah, at the time, there's really nobody that's doing it. So I guess if you're holding that passion and that focus, you're just gonna be like, all right, well, I guess we got to do it here.
right.
Yeah, crazy. And using someone else's dime to get it done.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely astounding that happened. And you gotta admire that the level of guts that took to not only hire a guy in but give him a fake title.
Right.
And then hiring him in, I thought it was interesting that Catmull and basically all the people at Lucas, when they were pitching this Tubby the Tuba, was that when they were still over at that was still when they were over at Lucas, or was that before that? I'm forgetting that now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. So the Tubby the Tuba, they presented this story at SIGGRAPH, and they're showing it, and essentially people have got their heads down on desks. Other people are looking around like, when will it end? And it was so crazy that at the end of it, they're looking around and they're saying, okay, you can have all the technology in the world, you can have all the skills in the world, you can have as many great, talented people as you want, but if you don't have the story, it's never going to hook anybody. And I thought it was really cool that, goes back to where Lasseter comes into play. I thought it was really cool that once Catmull meets Lasseter and he's like, this is the guy that gets story but also has the technical side of things, so this is why we really need this guy no matter what.
Yep. Yeah, so a couple things. So that was from NYIT, and that's the little film that they made there. And I think that was really when Catmull realized we can't be here. Because, we've got all this technical expertise, but we don't have the people who know the story.
Right, that's what it was. Yep, absolutely.
Yep. And then jumping ahead to now Lucasfilm, and when they brought John on board, right away, Price talks about how John he was really excited to use their animation tools and started giving feedback back to the technical people on what they could do better, because they now had an animator there who could really give them, someone who knew the Disney's principles of animation and how an animator would really use the tools.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this is John Lasseter's little statement of how technology, what is it, art challenges technology, and technology
it challenges the art. Enhances the art. Yeah. So one of the things that as they're forwarding and continuing their journey to get to having computer graphics be what it is and computer animation be what it is, I thought it was really interesting in that Lucas, and again in Chapter 3 in Lucasfilm's chapter, where you get not only people pushing against them from a technology standpoint, but now you're getting animation experts pushing against them. So you've got Frank Thomas, one of the 9 old men that says, in fact, I'm just going to read it right out of here. Shortly thereafter, however, Thomas wrote a lengthy essay in which he seemed to argue that computer animation was a dead end. He says, even today, there is no electronic process that produces anything close to the quality, to Snow White quality, and there is little reason to believe that there ever will be. This kind of animation may simply not be suited for this new medium. Just absolutely stunning and shocking.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. That here, I'm sure that John Lasseter looked up to him, and here he's kind of, this computer animation stuff, it's never gonna really fly.
And it's just got to be so disheartening. Like I was saying, not only from a technology standpoint are people like, hey, stop making animation, do this, and then nope, we're going to be a hardware company now. And then the people that are the elders of animation and hand-drawn are like, you're all full of it too.
Right, yeah. Although it is good and nice that later on he came back, didn't he, and say that kind of gave his blessing, or said that he could, he was now a believer of the computer animation, and
Yes, and
I
it
don't
was
remember where
nice.
that
It was
was.
nice because sometimes when some people say things like that, they're so steadfast in what they said, they always stick with it. Yeah, and I think it was around the time of Red's Dream. Um, yeah, it was. They visited and they basically said, "John, you've done it." It was
Okay,
on
yeah, that's
yeah
right. Yeah,
page 103. John, you did it. And so essentially, he went back on his statement where he was saying there's no future for it, and it's one of those things where I guess maybe it takes a big person to go back and say, you know what, I even wrote a whole paper on this saying that it was not going to become anything, but you know what, I'm wrong. I'm going to retract it, and you did it.
yeah, yep,
So that certainly had to feel like some massive vindication. And if you're talking about having the kind of passion that got you there in the first place, and now you hear that, that's gonna, I mean, no wonder that they continued to the level that they did after that. That's like the extra push that you need now. You're starting the momentum and getting people on your side and doing the
right.
right thing.
Yep, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
then
also, along those same lines, I like that found it interesting that George Lucas's feeling. So this is now The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. when they showed that at SIGGRAPH.
yep.
And Lucas came to town to see it, and he didn't even really come to see the film, right? He was coming to see his girlfriend. And
Right.
and so then, in public, I think Lucas said that it was a fine film, but in private, he said he thought it was horrible, and he just couldn't see. He didn't, couldn't see the vision of where it was going to go. So yeah, that would be probably lucky John didn't get fired after that.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. But that was one of those ones that the crowd, it resonated well with the crowd though, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess maybe at that point he's like, all right, maybe the crowd's getting it, but I'm not. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is funny for as much as a visionary, and I guess everybody has moments where where you think, oh boy, I was really on the cusp there, and then other times you're like, whew, what was I thinking? In denying that. But I guess for as many visionary things as George Lucas has done, he's had equally as many missteps. But I think that that's the same. I mean, if you're talking about jumping ahead even in the book, that's with Steve Jobs too.
Oh yeah.
For as many successes as he's had missteps too. And just like both of them, the missteps might have been big, but they were not as big as the successes that they then had as well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's a great thing about this book is that there are just so many kind of fun facts and anecdotes, I guess, about, I like the little part where Brad Bird was hanging around Lucasfilm trying to get hired back in the early 80s.
Yeah, and
And,
that's where. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, and then I was also going to say, again, with George Lucas, I mean, the guy is amazing because obviously, you look at the first three Star Wars films and just
Right,
how
of course. No,
revolutionary they were. But then the fact that Empire Strikes Back had no CGI at all.
right.
So just little facts like that really make the book a fun read, and I enjoyed reading things like that.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too. When you brought up Brad Bird, what made me think of it is, I love the fact that he took the time to throw that in there. That's something that's so small and insignificant that it wouldn't necessarily need to be mentioned. That Brad Bird at that time was, like they said, like Lucasfilm was so hot. They had resumes pouring in left and right, and everybody wanted to work there. People just wanted to come and be a part of it. It was kind of insignificant, but the reason why it turned out to be significant and why I really appreciate him putting it in there is because obviously we know it's a key player in the future. And I thought it was just a cool foreshadowing of he was here then. Again, like everybody else, it was like no, no, no. But then later on, it comes full circle, and we get the whole chapter where the section where it breaks it down by Finding Nemo and The Incredibles, and you could see what they're doing there too. So I thought that was really cool. And how do you even dig up that detail?
Yeah, yeah. Although I have been going through he's got a great bibliography in the back. And he lists all of his references.
Yes,
and so
it's huge.
It is huge, and that'd be one question I'd love to ask him is how long did it take to pull all this information together and do all of these interviews and get all this information, because it must have been, it had to have been a lot of time and effort.
Yeah. Okay. So here's like the first page here. It's like page 2 in the hardcover book. It's 289. Well, the bibliography, yeah, it goes through 292. But even in addition to that, he's got notes on all the pages.
All the notes. And how many pages of notes does he have? Exactly. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So we're talking about from 288 is where it ends, and it starts on 273. And, I mean, it's like 1, 2, 3. It just goes right through it. I mean, it is a... I mean, I thought about that, too. I was actually taking notes the first time I read it. Like, make sure I go check out this paper or go look at this. Because, I mean, you can really dig in, and this is like the how-to guide to really get into it.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, I've downloaded a few of the papers that I found because it's like, I want to go back and read these, you know?
Oh, did you end up getting a chance to look at those at all?
The only one I went through in any detail was they did an advanced render man. That was a later document. That came out in 2000.
Okay.
And I was just looking through that.
Okay.
But
Any major things or anything that gleaned from that was like, oh wow, this is really kind of cool, or was it just more technical in nature?
Yeah, it was pretty technical. So
okay.
At least the parts that I read.
Sure. All right. Well, let's start talking a little bit about Toy Story, and let's get to the film side of the book, because obviously, as you get into the book, it takes you through Ratatouille, like we mentioned, but there is a lot of details in regards to the film, each of the films along the way. And the one thing that I thought was really cool, and somebody else had mentioned this in the forum when we were talking about Toy Story That Time Forgot, since they're doing a half-hour Christmas special, and it's based around the Toy Story gang. I thought it was really cool that, obviously just reiterating, because this has been known, but that Tin Toy was originally, I mean, that was going to be Tin Toy Christmas, was originally a 30-minute holiday special. I thought it was kind of cool that so many of the ideas that they populated in the early days of Pixar, where you're talking about Wall-E coming out of that, you're talking like where they had like that original brainstorm session. You've got Toy Story, Wall-E, even some of the ideas in Toy Story 2 and 3 all came from iterations of the first Toy Story.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and I think it was that very first, maybe even the very first, not screenplay, but treatment they did for Toy Story. And you read through there, you read about the dump and other elements that, yeah, you see in either Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3. It's just, they're really good about, they know what a good idea is, and okay, it doesn't fit here, but then they'll bring it back in a later film or whatever, and yeah, that's
and
so cool.
You hear that same thing among musicians, where they say, like, this middle of the song, this section of it just isn't fitting here, but then they end up turning that into its own song. So yeah, as far as if you're talking about high-level artists, if you will, they do. They know what a good idea is. They know how to hang on to it. But it's so cool because, like, yeah, you mentioned the garbage dump. I wrote down some of them too. There was a yard sale. There was a kindergarten playground. It's like just crazy because the yard sale obviously found its way directly into Toy Story 2. The dump, that was Toy Story 3. There's a garbage truck which gets used. Then there's
in 3. Yep.
Right, the kindergarten playground, that's in 3.
Right.
I mean, it's just so cool how those kind of all mirrored there. And then I thought it was even more interesting, again, just to with that Toy Story That Time Forgot being a Christmas special that they're going to do this year, and it's still based around those Toy Story characters. Kind of cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Fun stuff. Yeah.
One thing that I really liked in the section about Toy Story 2 was how the author went through the how every shot, kind of like what you're doing with your Pixar pipeline. He goes through and talks about how every shot goes through these 8 different departments, and goes through art department and the layout, and then animation, and he just has so many great details. That's one thing I really enjoyed was the level of. There's some really great technical details in the book, and
it's not just Yeah, it's not just high-level things where you're talking about. And Toy Story was a box office success. Yeah, it goes certainly much, much deeper under the surface than just looking at that high level there.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you were mentioning as far as going through iterations of the script. One of them I wrote down is it's um, crazy how real that none of them, like speaking of Stanton, Lasseter, or Doctor, didn't have any real script writing background, but they still ended up putting together as the other people they brought in, and landed on Josh Whedon as it ended. But they said like essentially that they had a pretty decent script for not having any real background in script writing.
Yeah. Yeah. That is. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, talk
Well,
about hitting some.
Brad Bird wrote both Iron Giant and The Incredibles, and he rewrote Ratatouille. And I'm not familiar with what his previous writing experience is, but yeah, he wrote all that by himself. And
That is true. That is true. And you think like a lot of times, you have writers and directors. It's really cool when you have somebody that has the ability to put the story there, but then also carry that through to the vision for the directing as well. So you can really get that whole the continuity of the story and the picture element.
yep, exactly.
Yeah, cool stuff. Also one thing that people that have listened to either our podcast or have heard before, they know that I feel pretty passionately about one of the reasons that I got so into Pixar right from the beginning was an element that John Lasseter was very headstrong on, which was that there would be no singing
Yep.
in the film. And he thought, heck, if they start singing, it's going to take people out of this too much. And how he had to negotiate with Disney to say, okay, we'll have lyrics in the songs, but we're not going to have any singing in the movie. And I know people love a good musical, but even to this day, if I go to theater and I see shows and all these kind of things, and it's still, there's elements where I'm like, I can't stop thinking to myself, why are they singing right now? Why would they be singing? So I love the fact that that was a negotiation that he held true to and said, this is what it's got to be.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, to their credit, the way they do use music in songs is, they've done a great job. If you look at a song like Jesse's song from Toy Story 2, and I think we've talked before, like Michael Giacchino's scores and Up and movies like that, just how poignant the music can be. So.
Yeah, and can you imagine the married life sequence in Up if they were singing through their pain? And you can see it. You can see it. They said they all have to have the I want moment where they sing, the lead character sings their pain and says, I want this. Could you imagine if they're singing about wanting to have a child or wanting to have more money or whatever to go do their adventures and travel? That would just not have had anywhere near the impact as
Exactly.
HBO's Married Life score.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it set a good precedent. But the one thing I thought was interesting about that is I wonder why Disney bent on that at all, because they really were sticking it to Pixar at all levels. They said Disney can end the contract. They own 100% of the project when it's done. They had no real creative control. Kind of what I was talking about earlier about how do you still keep motivated and push forward when that's happening. But I wonder how and why they gave up on that one element when that was Disney's bread and butter for so long. How did they convince them of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe it has to do with the fact that they even went with Disney, that Disney went with Pixar, to do these films. Just saying, yeah, I think, Katzenberg really realized that they did need some kind of change. And
Sure.
so yeah, but that is a good question.
Yeah, I'd love to know that one. And
Yeah.
and since you mentioned Katzenberg, think about how much of a driving force he was to get Pixar where they are today, how the input that he had, but at the same time turn around and how much of a foe he became.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah,
Because
that was.
obviously you're talking about he gave them the push. he rejected Katzenberg rejected some of the early scripts and said you've got to do this, you've got to make them more likable. But then how do you then recover from that and become just crazy stuff.
Right. Well, and then when he leaves Disney, how he really kind of was trying to put it to Disney, and in effect then trying to hurt Pixar. So, yeah, quite a shift.
I know. I couldn't imagine that. And obviously, there's those people that when Katzenberg recently didn't he get a arts medal from the president or some type of honoring where they were talking about that? And you can see the comments floating around on Twitter and everything, like some people like ugh and this guy, but at some level you can't deny the impact and the importance that he had in getting Toy Story to the position that it was in.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yep, Toy Story, well, I think, yeah, I mean, especially Toy Story. I think it went through a couple of the other films, too, so...
It did, but yeah, I mean, as far as if the box office didn't hit the way it did, Disney probably wouldn't have even optioned, because they had that option for the second and third movie. They may not have even optioned it at that point.
That's true, yep.
Yeah, so it's interesting. And then just, the sheer level of quality. I mean, I can't imagine. Again, the next point that I had here is how Lasseter rejected the idea of that they could do animation with lip syncing, where it would be easier to just have the lips automatically moved. But he said no. In order to get the real emotion, you have to have the animator physically moving the lips to get that across. And it's just, I can't imagine if. And I know sometimes you've really got to stand up for what you believe in. But again, you're sitting across from these high-level Disney people, and you're telling them, nope, we're not going to do it that way. It's just amazing to have the gumption, and sometimes I wish I had the guts to really stand for some of those things.
Yeah, definitely. That focus on quality has always been there. Starting with Toy Story and through the other movies, and it's jumping ahead a little bit to talk about Toy Story 2 and how they had to really rewrite that story and redo almost the entire thing with only 9 months of time to do it. But knowing that was the right thing to do, and and that and it's not just that the leaders were doing it, right? Everyone was on board and willing to dedicate themselves, and they were all doing it for the same cause and for the same purpose. That we want to put out the best product that we can.
And it's crazy and that's honestly, I mean, that comes through. It obviously has to, because in '95, I was still finishing up high school. I was a junior in high school at the time, and when I'm sitting in the theater, there was something about it. I can distinctly remember, and I've talked about this before, sitting there thinking, because I was in a media arts class at the time, and I didn't see it on opening weekend, but my teacher had, and he was talking about how insane it was that these characters that are animated have never made him cry like he did and feel for them like he ever had before. And that really, like, our whole class was like, all right, we've got to see this thing. But it blew my mind. And years later, probably even just about 2-3 years ago, I ran across that same teacher. And I mentioned to him specifically his passion that he portrayed and the detail that he talked about in Pixar and how that helped formulate the love that I have for Pixar and helped really drive me towards expertise and professionalism and detail and how it matters. And I just thought, I thanked him for that. And it was funny, is he's like, I don't remember that at all. But do you remember seeing Pixar in the theater? Pixar. Do you remember seeing Toy Story in the theater and what you felt coming out of it? Or did you see it in the theater?
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't remember where I saw Toy Story.
Okay. What was the first one that you remember distinctly? Like, okay, this is this is a Pixar movie in the theater.
I think for sure A Bug's Life.
Okay.
I remember a little bit of the film, but also then the bloopers.
Oh, yeah.
Knocking my socks off. What in the world? You
Yeah,
know,
that was really groundbreaking for what it was. I mean,
yeah.
it was so unexpected.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember with Bugs Life too. Well, not with Bugs Life too, with Bugs Life as well. I remember my experience there too, and I remember that it happened to be a snow day, and I happened to be off. Like work had closed. The only reason I remember what day it was for Bugs Life, it happens to be because it was so snowy that when we were coming back in his Escort, that we got stuck on a very hilly road and we were dodging cars slamming into us all over the place. So that's the only
Whoa.
reason I remember, because I'm like, I came out of Bugs Life and we were having a great time, and now we're trying to avoid accidents and everything like that. But I was still in the back of my mind laughing about how they got me to care about an ant, which I frankly find pretty sick.
Yep. Yeah, it's just like you said about how you feel about these characters, and you're not thinking that, oh, this is an animated film. You're just thinking about how great the characters are, how great the story is, and the emotions. I mean, really, you talk about Jesse's song in Toy Story 2, and that song would come on the radio, in the car or whatever. I couldn't even talk about the song and how, if I was telling someone about it without starting to kind of tear up and stuff. It's just crazy.
Yeah, what's funny is I remember I think is it Pixar Story, the documentary where you've got Tom Hanks and Tim Allen sitting next to each other, and they're talking about being 40-some-year-old men sitting in a theater crying during Jesse's song.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's funny because before that, I will say, I guess I just wasn't at either the level of maturity or I wasn't ready for it yet. But before that, in the theater, when that would come on or when I'd be watching it, I really was like trying to hold it in and hold it together. Because yeah, absolutely, I was just in the theater. I remember mentally wanting to just break down at that moment.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, that's one of those strong things. But I remember when they said it, I'm like, all right, I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
And then everybody's heard me talk about my experience in Toy Story 3, where Julie and I left Toy Story 3, where we basically, I was in the bathroom and just
Oh, totally, yeah.
turn it
Toy
into
Story 3 and the married life sequence and Up, and I'm just happy that married life sequence happens early enough in the film that you have time to recover throughout the rest of the film, and
time to recover.
Thank goodness there's credits at the end, right? That you can sit and try to gather recompose yourself.
Well, see, that's why the bloopers in Toy Story 2 were so great, because you still might be reeling from some of the emotion there, but then you've got the boop, and then Woody coming out of the box. Hey, partner, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, and then in Chapter 7, where they're talking about making it fly 2, and this is kind of where they're getting into Toy Story 2, and they're also talking about kind of wrapping up Toy Story 1 as well. And this is where, again, with all of the craziness that's going on, Steve Jobs trying to sell Pixar still. He's still trying to go out there, still trying to find a buyer. Just
and
all
imagine what would have happened there, right? That was 1 year. So in 1994, he was trying to make a deal with Microsoft.
Yeah.
A year before the film's release. I mean, boy, what would have happened then?
I know, what an absolute loss that would have been to all of animation. I mean, it makes you wonder, would it have resurfaced somewhere else? Would that story have just died off? Would the art have been where it is today? Would we be sitting here talking about this? I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
You gotta love how all those layers trickle down like that. But I did like the fact that all of a sudden he has this aha, whoa moment where he's seeing these story reels and he's saying, okay, this thing's about to get really real, and we need to make this thing happen. And so he starts to say we're no longer doing this, and then he starts coming up with the whole let's take it public scenario. And that's another detail the book goes into that it absolutely doesn't even need to, but it's so cool that it does, is where they're talking about even the firm that they hire to write the IPO. How
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, how this guy came to, people told him, oh, you're graduating from college. They talk about what college he's graduating from. You should be going here, and they say, no, I'm going to end up going into the Palo Alto area. and then how that leads to him knowing Steve Jobs, which leads to that firm being the Silicon Valley, kind of IPO, leading them to the market, and then you've got how then that leads into Pixar. It's just all the details are so thought out in this, and I have no idea how. I was thinking about it as I was reading it again, and as I was preparing for us to have this discussion. And I know we've already alluded to it enough, but how do you plan out? That must be a serious whiteboard session.
Totally. That is the question that I would love to ask. What does the layout for this whole project look like, and how do you pull that all together?
I think I know it didn't work out for David's timing, but I think I am going to follow up with him and then just see if I can get some answers to those couple questions that we've had, just because, man, oh man, we've interviewed him before over email. We just did like a quick back and forth over email, but yeah, I'm going to ask him those additional questions because it is crazy to think about how all of these details, and then once you're like, okay, this is the firm that wrote the IPO, that's all you really need to know. Why did he be like, okay, now I'm going to go back and he knows Jobs, but then I'm going to go into this guy's history of graduating college here? So cool, so cool. I mean, that it's a Pixar type level of detail.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously in Chapter 7 as well, in the Making It Fly, they're also talking about all the companies that Hasbro and Mattel turning down the toy deals and saying, we've already got, we don't want to remarket a Potato Head, and they're like, hello, we've got all these other Buzz and Woody, for God's sakes.
Right.
I could not imagine. You've got your Buzz right back there on your shelf.
Yeah, I'm looking at all your toys, and I knew, I've seen your, other Hangouts and stuff, so I know this wall and all that stuff you have. And so I'm just feeling a little sad about my background. So yeah, this is what I have is my Buzz.
Now,
so.
which Buzz is this? Is this an original? Is this...
Oh, cool. I don't know. I haven't played with him actually in a long time. Sorry to say, his wings do pop out somehow.
Oh, you got to press the red button. You got to press the red button on the front of him.
No, those don't do anything.
Uh-oh.
Could be broken.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
All right.
But yeah, but could you... That's fine. We're getting distracted there with all of our toy talk. In fact, I've even thought, to be honest with you, that I need more back here. And I feel like, this whole, baseball picture that I took and everything, that's all old hat, old hat. I got to get rid of it.
It doesn't fit.
No, I know. So I'm thinking I've got to get, we've got over here our Partysaurus poster, and we did just get, actually, the Toy Story That Time Forgot, the one that was signed from San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, okay.
So we just got that. So I'm thinking maybe I'll have to frame up one of those bad boys and put them over there.
Yeah, that'd be a nice addition. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to try to figure out what I'm going to do here. Yeah, move some things around. But
there you go.
My tin toy one is still one of my favorites. I love that.
That is a very nice one. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So, anyways, we diverge.
Man.
But so obviously we're talking about the toys, and
yes.
With Hasbro, with Mattel turning it down, it's crazy how again it's another one of these things where sometimes you can't rely on the big guys even though you want to go to them, and then Thinkway steps in at the Toy Fair or
Toy Fair February of '95.
Right, they're like, let's do this, and then so Thinkway's like, sure, let's do it, and I'm glad that Thinkway took it over because Thinkway put the detail into it that maybe Mattel or maybe Hasbro would have said, you know what, we're going to do this first run maybe a little bit reduced because we don't have the full belief in it. Whereas Thinkway was so small, they took the gamble on it and said, if this pays off, it's going to be gigantic.
Right. What along those same lines, what I found really crazy is that even Disney Consumer, when they first went to Disney, I thought it was maybe a year before the film was released, and they were all busy on kind of the other Disney films. They hadn't spent any time even thinking about a Toy Story, and that's where they came up with, well, we've got Buzz and Woody. And they're saying, yeah, well, what are you going to do with them? Or what toys are you going to need or whatever?
Right.
So their own marketing partner just was so kind of hands-off That
I know.
uh,
I know, and it just and it's you think of all those people, and you just want to go, what were you thinking there?
yeah,
But you know what? What they were thinking was this is a business, and we have profits to watch, and this is a gamble, and we're going to take the safe bet and go for. Did they say it was Prince of Egypt or what other movie it was that was coming out at that time?
maybe
They're like,
Pocahontas. So
Pocahontas, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, they said
yeah,
let's go with this. But it's like, I guess at some level from a business standpoint, a challenge and buck the trend from time to time to make those big leaps. And I guess it's like what we're talking about among everybody here with Lasseter, like we talked about at the beginning with Lasseter, Catmull, with Steve Jobs, and even George Lucas. You've got these missteps, but the steps that hit bigger than anything else, and that's what makes you who you are.
right.
The
Yep.
key is you just can't have too many missteps in a row.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a great lesson for all of us, right? That you have to expect mishaps. This gets a little bit to Ed Catmull's book too, and I know we don't want to talk about that, but
No, go ahead. I loved it. Yeah.
but how he talks about unless you're never going to really make anything big, you have to plan on failures. You got to try new things, and yeah, there are going to be failures, but those aren't failures. You're learning from those, and you're recovering and figuring out how to do it better the next time. And so without going through that cycle, you're never going to become anything big. So it's just a great, overall lesson.
Yeah, and it's funny because that lesson isn't called out specifically in the book, in the Pixar Touch. But yeah, you're right. It is in Creativity Inc., and that is
Yeah.
it is a big one. And I think that more companies should have that mentality of, and I guess a lot of companies don't because they're not in the business of creation. A lot of times there's bigger risk when you're talking about companies that are coming up with products or movies or those kind of things where they're expected to have this profit all the time, especially the pressure when you're a public company.
Yeah.
Where you've got to have that continued, you've got the street telling you, here's your expectation of what we're thinking you're going to do based on your past and what you're telling us you're going to do, and if you don't do it, we're going to tank your stock, which blows my mind.
I know it is. And not only that, okay, we tanked your stock. Now we're going to come in and buy you out and
Right.
maybe sell you off in parts or because the book talks about that that Comcast made an offer, a hostile offer for Disney.
Right.
And so imagine if that had gone through and what Comcast would have done. Would split up maybe all the parts and maybe just kept the media part, but then you would spun off the theme parks and maybe sold off the stores and the consumer piece of it, and that's just too hard for me to even fathom.
Oh, I know. Well, Disney did do that whole thing even with their stores, and that's a total divergence. But they did do that
Yeah.
whole thing with the stores where they sold it off, and now they're essentially buying them back and then reopening some of the stores. Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But speaking about the stock, an interesting fact that I know we've talked about, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here. We were both Pixar shareholders, and when did you first pick up the stock?
It was 1997.
Yeah, see, that's so cool because I was a latecomer. Now, granted, 97, I was a freshman or a sophomore in college. I didn't.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about how old I was then. I was close to that, I think. Yeah, somewhere around that.
You're probably in your early 30s, right?
Sure, something like that.
Maybe late 20s. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got it in 2003, and knowing the grand finances that I had, I think I bought 14 shares at the time, and I think it was, if I remember, it was somewhere around the $65 mark. But I thought it was interesting talking about in the book how they said how the stock took off, and then it went way down, and it was somewhere down like $14 or $15 at one point, if I remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what made you want to dive in? Was it just after you, like, because if it was 97-ish,
It was
that
before. So yeah, it was before A Bug's Life came out. So Toy Story had come out, and so there must have already, I'm a little fuzzy on all the details around my memory.
yeah.
But it had to be something about how unique and different it was. and
Right.
that it's such a fun company to follow. I kind of subscribe to the theory that you should really enjoy the companies that you follow, and if you're going to buy their stock,
Of
and talk
course.
about just a fun company to own. Getting the shareholder letters from Steve Jobs, and back then they gave little presents in there when you'd get the annual shareholder letter, and just such a fun company. And so I guess that must have been my rationale for it. I mean, so it was partly maybe emotional because I knew from a purely logical standpoint, here's a company that's not going to have another film out till 2008, or I'm sorry, 1998, and they weren't coming out with these things on a steady basis. So logically, you're going to think, well, gosh, it's going to be a real volatile stock, but you know, I guess I somehow maybe subconsciously I'd like to think that I knew that this was different. That this was going to be something fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I think a lot of people had that feeling, but I don't think obviously enough people, jumped on it at that time. I mean, obviously the stock took off at the beginning, but then when it, goes down to such a level, um, a lot of people are starting to lose faith in it at that point. How did you hang on all the way through the Disney merger, or did you at any point get rid
Yeah,
of it?
I think I got rid of. So I know I took profit at different times, and then I'd
Okay.
add shares, kind of when they did take those drops,
Yeah.
because I mean, and I do remember being worried after uh, Toy Story, Bugs Life, Toy Story 2, and then Monsters Inc. came out, and they're just hit after hit, and you're just wondering, okay, I distinctly remember with Finding Nemo seeing a really early teaser trailer and going, I don't know, is that funny? It was just Dory and Marlin in the water, and I think Dory scaring the fish or something, and I mean, I thought that was hilarious, but I thought, wow, I wonder, I didn't know much more about it. And so I recall having these fears that, oh, maybe, is this going to do as well? And they just, yeah, everyone just keeps getting better. You build this trust. So then whenever they would drop, I take, buy a few more shares. And then, if they did get a little high, I might take a little profit. And so, but yeah, I held them through the merger.
Yeah, I did. I, I was such a because Julie was clearly and still is the Disney fanatic as well, and it's so fitting that we had our own merger, if you will, by coming
Yeah.
together as the Disney fan and the Pixar fan.
Yeah.
Um, and it's one of those things where when they announced it, I waited till right before the merger, and I actually sold it off because I'm like, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to be part of Disney because at the time I didn't have any. I was seeing Disney not doing things that I loved either, and I was like, I don't know that I want to take this ride. And so I lost the faith in it from a stock standpoint. I knew that
Right.
what Pixar was still going to do, but yeah, from a stock standpoint, I was ashamed to say that I got rid of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pretty big Disney fan, so I was okay holding on, but I was concerned. Bob Iger has really won me over because I had some big concerns about him, and but yeah. So fortunately, I held on, and who knows what Pixar would have done if they had stayed standalone. But it's been an okay ride. So
Yeah.
as a Disney shareholder, I've been happy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of those things that looking back, I wish I would have just stayed a part of it. But you're right about Bob Iger, and I think you're right to have trepidation when you heard that he was coming on because of how much, I guess, just instability and craziness was going on there prior to that. And he did have to win people over. And was it? I don't think it was in this book. Where was it that I've heard something, and I don't know if you even know this, but where somebody said that the best decision that he's made, maybe it was Pixar Story, that documentary, where they said that that was like the best decision that he's made for Disney in leading the turnaround effort.
Um, I mean, they talk a lot about the merger in this book and go into some of that. So, but yeah, I don't know about that exact
Yeah, yeah,
statement or
yeah.
whatever.
Right.
So,
Yeah, the
but
one thing. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, I mean, that was one of the first things he did. Like the day after he became CEO, he called up. I thought he called up Steve Jobs and Lasseter and um, you know, started trying to mend their relationship, and so yeah, that's
Yeah, it's a big move, especially after the kind of some of the decisions that had been made ahead of that were causing some of those rifts in the relationship. Um, Getting back to Toy Story, just to kind of wrap that up, one of the other things that I thought was interesting in there, in the book, and again in Chapter 7, was where they talk about how even though Disney didn't get behind it from the toy standpoint, as we were talking about, they did put their marketing pressure behind it as far as presence in the market. They're talking about us, Burger King toys. They were selling them for $1.99, and they're talking about that they even did a making of feature that they put on the Disney Channel.
yeah.
I don't think.
And they had things at the Disney, back then it was called Disney MGM Studios. They had things going on there, and that was one thing that Steve Jobs really, what turned him around is some premiere that they had. Was it maybe Pocahontas, that they were going to take over Central Park?
Central Park, yeah, it was the Pocahontas one, yep.
Yep, and he goes, yeah, so when this company gets behind a film, they can make things happen.
Right.
So.
Yeah, really interesting to see that. But I thought it was interesting, the making of thing. Did you ever see the making of from that? I don't think I've seen that.
I don't think so either, no. That'd be a good thing to kind of research. I should.
Yeah, I'm going to have to try to dig that up, because that would be interesting to see the perspective on it now. And I wonder if they've pulled other pieces of it and put it into other documentaries or features like that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really cool when they finally had the premiere at the El Capitan Theater, and they're talking about before it launched, they went around the corner and they saw that Burger King and how everything was plastered there. And just when they all had that realization that we spent so much time building, developing, and creating these toys, but they're no longer ours, they're the world's.
Yeah.
That is just such a cool and, I guess just eye-opening moment of, wow, just these are now not ours. So this is going to be, they believed in it so much that this is going to be the lexicon of toys now. This is, people are going to be, and I can't imagine today in a world without Buzz or Woody or the gang.
Oh gosh, really? Yeah. Yeah. It'd also be a little scary, I think, to think that, to see the impact that this is having. I mean, scary in kind of a good way, so, but yeah.
Yeah, just wild stuff, wild stuff.
Yep.
So as far as Chapter 8, where we're talking about all-out war, we alluded to some of the Katzenberg elements in there before, where we talked about him moving on and then essentially probing and asking all these questions, and then throwing ants out there trying to get back at Disney, which ultimately led to getting back at Pixar, like you had mentioned. But it's just crazy how they said Lasseter addressed the Pixar team and essentially said, hey guys, this is out there, but you know what, it doesn't matter, we're going to spend the time and make the better product. He's showing that outward confidence as a leader should. What's really happening behind closed doors there? At some level, he's got to be like, what is going on?
Yeah. Well, boy, and just maybe feeling a betrayal, because he's the one who talked to Katzenberg and, was telling him about Bug's life, and then to hear that this guy who really, as we've talked about earlier, Katzenberg pushed Toy Story through and was such a huge proponent of getting together with Pixar and making that film, and now he's off making his own, making this Ants film, and boy, yeah, it's probably just pulling your hair out. And,
I know, I can't even, and I remember they said that he called him up and said, how can you do this?
Yeah.
But it's just I can't even imagine. And then they said something along the lines of, I think it was like Ants made, was it like 89 or 90 something million, and then Toy Story or Bug's Life made 163. So in the end, obviously, they still were the ones that prevailed. And yeah, the Ants, the Ants looked pretty rough in the movie Ants, not in Bug's Life. I mean, obviously at the time, Bug's Life, they put so much thought into, like they talked about, that they can't have the ants all move as one, or else they look too mechanized. So they had to come up with all those crowd developments rather than just resting on their laurels and saying, well, this is what we can do. They said, we're going to push through and develop this and make this next thing really happen.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So it says that A Bug's Life grossed 163, and Ants made 90 million.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So then obviously, as we're following that, I'm looking at the time as well. I usually try to keep these to about an hour and a half. We trail a little bit more. Chapter 9 is covering Monsters Incorporated, and I would say that we're not going to get into that too much, because I would actually recommend for anybody that wants to dig into Monsters Incorporated, Jeff and I, on episode 15 of the Pixar Post podcast, we had gone through and done a very in-depth, combining details from Pixar Touch, as well as To Infinity and Beyond, that book, and pulled together a lot of great details from there. So if anybody's looking to get into all the details on Monsters, Inc., episode 15 is a great one for that. But yeah, and I'll kind of just high leveling it. You've got chapter 10, which is where it talks about Finding Nemo and the Incredibles. And then I'll even go past there. That's the title of Emeryville. And then Homecoming is where it's pretty much wrapping up, where it's talking about Cars and Ratatouille. And then you hit the epilogue there. Unfortunately, as far as from a time standpoint, we won't go and cover all those. And then I did mention in the paperback version, which is an updated version to the hardcover, it does have the extra chapters, which will take you through, I think, just the very beginning of 2009 or something like that, if I remember properly. But it definitely, it goes to 2009 through Wall-E. So it was pretty cool that they did that addendum to get a little bit more detail there. And that's cool, because I actually asked him, I remember at one point, I think one of the questions that I had asked, or maybe I chose not to because I saw somebody had already asked David Price, the author, was, are you going to continue to make addendums? Because once you see one, you're like, is this just going to be the ever-evolving book? And I really wish it was.
No doubt, yeah. I don't have the addendum, so I'm going to have to maybe pick up that version of it so I can get that.
Yeah, like I said, I just, for anybody that wasn't watching at the top of the show, David Price was kind enough to send over this copy and gave Julie and I a little bit of a nice salutation to TJ and Julie with appreciation from David, just to say thanks for picking his book for the book club. So yeah, I'm going to read that up, and then I'll let you guys, and I'll let you, Jeff, know how the addendum is there to get through those extra chapters. But obviously, wrapping up, thank you again for the people that were watching along. And for our next book, we're going to go a little bit different. We're going to go to one of the Art of books, and we're going to do the Art of Wall-E. And I'm pretty excited for this. There's obviously a lot of great artwork in here. There's a hometown hero, if you will, from Michigan, where I'm at, Jay Schuster, who is one of the very heavy designers on this in the development of Wall-E. And for other people that know, he was the one that came up with the What Up Fishes line in Partysaurus Rex. So I'm really excited to dig into this. Text that I've read before, but certainly great to look at it again and refresh, which is why another reason that I wanted to start the book club, because I'd read the Pixar Touch before, but it was great to look at it one more time and really absorb that information. So if anybody hasn't picked this up yet, we're going to spend about a month and a half and dig through this. I'll start updating all the dates and when we're going to have the Hangout to discuss the Art of Wall-E. And if you haven't also seen it too, we did some really cool fan art where when I first got my first version of the iPad was the iPad 3, and this drawing by Ralph Eggleston inspired me to try to recreate it on the iPad using Sketchbook Pro. So if you haven't seen that, go to our website, click on the fan art / gallery page, and check out that piece that we recreated and some of the inspiration behind the Ralph Eggleston piece. So excited to talk about Wall-E. It's going to be a good one because Wall-E is, for me, I'd say visually it was the first one of Pixar's movies that, as I started to learn more about film and development and not just the story element, where to me that was the one that impacted me visually the most for the first time. I mean, obviously all the other movies were gorgeous, I'm not putting anything aside, but from my own personal mind, when I was in that mindset, it was the one that hit me, when I got to see how they racked the cameras differently and how the dust fell in the background when they're watching Wall-E. And certainly hope you join us in that discussion to talk about the Art of Wall-E. What we're going to do is talk through not only some of the text that's in there and some of the background that's in the book, but obviously it's not as text heavy as just an all text book. So one of the other things I'm going to challenge everybody with is to find your favorite pieces and mention either in the forum or if you join us on this discussion like Jeff is today, to chat about which of your favorite pieces, which of them are your favorite in the book and why. And again, if anybody wants to be a part of these discussions and wants to chat along with us for any of our Google Hangouts, because we do have the off-the-cuff and on-the-fly Hangouts as well when big news comes out that we start talking about as well. After the Toy Story That Time Forgot event happened at the Comic-Con this year, we had a Hangout that evening to talk about it. You can go to the forum or either on our book club page, and in there there's a part that talks about how you can sign up to be one of the people that joins us live in the Hangout to talk along with everybody else. So thank you again, Jeff, for joining us. And just as a sign-off for people that might be listening again, tell them about, not about your site again, but just mention your site again and give it a quick plug as well as your Twitter handle there.
Yeah, you bet. So on Twitter, it's This Day in Pixar, and the website is thisdayinpixar.com. So it's been
Absolutely.
a pleasure. I'm glad to get back and talk to you. And it was like you said, it was fun. It was fun to read the book again. It'd been a few years since I had read it, so I really enjoyed getting back into it.
Yeah, and what I need to figure out, though, is how you get all of those memories in there, how you know all of those people's names so well without, you're not looking down, I'm watching your eyes, you're not doing this like I'm doing. How do you come up with this recall here? What's the
I
tip?
don't know. Yeah. I've got my iPad over here with my notes, so...
Hey, that's fair. That's fair. So wait a minute. If they're on an iPad, you gave me the hey, you're all official and typed up here. So you've got them typed up as well, then, hey.
Oh yeah.
Bring it into frame a little more and yeah. Here, hang on. I'll click over to you. Oh, it's too bright. Bring it full frame so that way it refocuses the. That's all right.
Yeah.
But either way, so thank you again to everybody that watched along. Thank you to the questions that we had at the beginning there, and we're looking to, obviously, like I mentioned before, just continue the book club, just keep it growing and have some fun with it. And I'm planning on also bringing in some other books. I was thinking about maybe Disney War, some other things like that. Jeff, did you have any ideas as far as things that could come to your mind as far as future books to discuss at all?
I think Disney War would be a great book because I haven't read that one yet, so I'd be really excited to read that. And then Droid Maker by Michael Rubin, that covers George Lucas's early history up through about the mid '80s. So it includes him bringing in Ed Catmull and the team from NYIT up to Pixar spinning out. So
great. Okay, so so absolutely, I'll add that into the list of ones that I want to add as well. But yeah, I only thought of Disney War because of the whole Circle 7 discussion I know is in there. I had someone else bring that up to me, and they said, oh, you've got to read it because of the whole Circle 7 section of it. And then obviously, I was even thinking, and I'll try to get some feedback, so if anybody's listening to this, let me know what you think about looking at books like The Illusion of Life, and those types of more animation specific that are talking about the Disney animation era. Is that something that you want to get to, or do you want to stick to strictly the Pixar type books? It'll be interesting to see if if anybody jumps in with any thoughts on that.
Yeah,
so
that's a great idea.
Yeah, so I just figured, there's so many different areas you can jump in. But either way, thank you again so much for joining, Jeff, and be sure to visit This Day in Pixar. And you do an occasional post. You don't have it as more of a, you do it as kind of like when something comes up or when there's news that you want to kind of look back on, right?
Yeah. This summer has been kind of crazy, so it's been a little quiet. So hopefully I'll get a few more posts. I've got a couple of ideas for things. So hopefully I'll be get going more with those, and yeah.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah.
But either way, so definitely tune into his website. He's got great details, and even because it's historical, it's not like necessarily our site in a way where you're always watching the newest and most current news come up, and once it's gone, it's kind of in the past. The great thing about your site is that it's so historical, and that it's it is like a book in a way that it's the details there and it's not going away. It's not going to change. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting. So anyways, visit Jeff's site, and to everybody watching along, thank you again, and be sure to stay tuned to PixarPost.com all week for the latest Pixar news. Bye bye.